So we're going to cover two literary movements today. We're going to talk about the Romantic poets, and we're going to talk about Madame Bovary and realism. But the Romanticism movement was a direct response to the Enlightenment movement. So the Enlightenment movement we talked about last week with Molière. Other great Enlightenment thinkers were like the founding fathers of the U.S., people like Voltaire in France. There was a number of really good ones in Britain too. So this was a whole Western Europe movement centered on sort of taking religion out of the picture, right? Trying to look at the world through more of a philosophical lens, scientific lens. With the Enlightenment came things like deism. Like deism is the belief that, yeah, there is a higher power, but the higher power is not necessarily interfering in everyday affairs in the world. Like the deists like to use the phrase God's like a watchmaker, right? He wound up the watch and then he let the watch tick by itself. That's how people like Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin saw the Christian religion. Right? They thought that God wasn't necessarily involved in everything. But the Romanticism movement was a direct response. With the Enlightenment came something was lost with it, especially this sort of mystical. I took a COVID shot a couple of days ago, so I'm still sneezing. So if I sneeze randomly, I felt one coming just now. But with the Romanticism movement, something was lost with the Enlightenment. So they tried to bring that back. What was lost mainly was a sort of mystical thing with literature. Like they kind of wanted to bring like feeling back into literature. With the Enlightenment movement, it was so grounded in science, philosophy, but they kind of wanted to bring feeling back into literature. It was also a movement grounded in nature. Right? They wanted to, most of the subjects that they took up were about nature and all of its beauty and majesty, even how nature is sometimes terrifying. Right? The Romantics were the ones who came up with the word sublime. The sublime is when nature, think about something like the Grand Canyon, right? Or Yosemite, right? Like whenever you kind of see nature and something like that and all its like beauty and majesty, something that almost overwhelms you to see, right? Just because it's such a beautiful sight, they called that the sublime. So, this was definitely this was like the hippies before the hippies, right? They were all about spirituality and nature. They read stuff like Eastern religions, stuff like Hinduism and Buddhism, which has more of it, and Taoism from China, right? All those religions have more of nature is much more involved in those religions. Like you're more part of nature in those religions than you are in Western religions. So they would read stuff like that. That influenced it. So they were definitely unique and different than the Enlightenment. Realism, which we'll talk about with Foucault here in a minute, that's almost a direct response to Romanticism. So different flavors here as we keep going through the centuries. We're now in pretty much the 18th and 19th centuries in this class. So all these movements started kicking off around this time. But just to, so the ones that I gave you to read, I gave you some Wordsworth poems and some Blake poems. And I gave you one poem from Coleridge with Kubla Khan. Coleridge was pretty much a Wordsworth's student. Kind of like how Plato was a student of Socrates, Coleridge was pretty much a student of Wordsworth. Of the three, my personal preferences, I would probably rank them Blake, Coleridge, Wordsworth. I've always found Wordsworth to be kind of boring. Like that's just my taste, though. There's nothing. Don't take that as fact. That's just my taste. But it was these romantic guys too. Like we just finished talking about Paradise Lost. It was these romantic guys too who came up with a lot of these interpretations, even of that. Like the idea of Satan being the hero of Paradise Lost, and we should sympathize with him. Like God created him to fail, right? All those interpretations started with the Romantics. So that again kind of shows you they had more sort of a rebellious streak. Blake's a pretty cool guy because not only did he write poems, but he also was a great artist as well, a visual artist. So he actually illustrated his own books of poems. I'm not going to show you any today, but I would encourage you guys to Google it later. Like Blake actually illustrated all his old poems. If I don't know if any of you guys are horror fans in here, but if you know like the Hannibal Lecter stories, the story Red Dragon, right? The painting in that movie, that's one of Blake's. So Blake Thomas Harris really likes the writer of those books, really likes Blake. So that's why he brings in a lot of Blake stuff into his books. But let's Google. I'm gonna just show you guys the Tyger real quick. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on the poems. Madame Bovary's our main focus for today. I do want to talk about the Tyger. This is one of my favorite poems of all time. I really enjoy this poem. It's very different even in how it's metered. I'll share my screen with y'all. So William Blake's The Tyger. So it said that this one was in her book. But if you just read the first 4 lines, like if you try to pay attention to meter, you'll see how the meter is much different. Like Tyger, and if he spelled it Tiger, it would have an iambic beat to it. But he instead spells it Tyger. That has a trochaic beat. Right? Remember, a trochee is a stressed syllable followed by an unstressed syllable. So instead of Tiger, it's Tiger. I don't know. Can you guys tell the difference in how I just said that? Tiger versus Tiger. Can you kind of hear the difference? He spells it wrong on purpose to get the meter that he wants. So this is an iambic pentameter. This is what's called tetrameter. You only have 4 feet in the line instead of 5 feet. So you don't hit 10 syllables, you hit 8. But first, so you see how the meter works. Tiger, burning bright. So stress, unstress, stress, unstress, stress, unstress, stress. That's almost a perfect trochaic line, right? An iambic line's duh dum. This is dum duh, dum duh, dum duh. That's how the beat of this one works, right? The second one, he mixes and matches his beats crazily in this poem. In the forest of the night, in the forest of the night. So this has more like an anapestic beat. Remember an anapest, this da-da-dum, da-da-dum, in the forest of the night. The third line has a anapestic beat. What immortal hand or eye. So it starts with an anapest and then goes to iams after that. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry. So that this line is iambic. So within his first four lines, he mixes the meter up like crazy. Right? The first line's trochaic, the second line's anapestic, then the third and fourth lines are mostly iambic. So he's all over the place with his meter. So that's one thing the Romantics rejected too. Like they would still rhyme and stuff. As you see, he rhymes the lines back to back in couplets. They would still rhyme and stuff, but they were all about breaking all these old rules and stuff, like from the old sonnets and stuff. Like they weren't about following the rules and conventions. But it's a cool poem, even in its message. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry. Instead of saying it's symmetry, you say it as symmetry to rhyme with eye. In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand there sees the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? When thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, and what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp, there its deadly tears clasp? And the stars threw down their spheres and watered heaven with their tears. Did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? I've always really loved this stanza. Like, remember a minute ago, I was telling you about they were about the sublime, right? This nature and all of its terrifying majesty. Right? So Blake here is kind of trying to show that a tiger as a creature is kind of like that, right? Like, why do we like tigers so much? Right? Because they're the apex predator, right, of the world. Like they're scary, but they're also beautiful in a way. So he pretty much asked the question here: did the same God who made a lamb make this god awful predator in all its majesty? Right? He kind of raises that question here just to kind of show how tigers are even sort of sublime creatures. Yeah, so yeah, this is my favorite of the Romantic poems that we read. I always like to go over this one. This is a pretty famous one. But like I said, he's all over the place with meter and stuff like that. This isn't a sonnet. This is a completely different style of poem. He mixes and matches his meters. And he rhymes lines back to back. You don't rhyme lines back to back in sonnets except for the last two lines. So, like I said, they were all about changing up the old rules and things like that too. I don't know. I'll ask you guys, what do you think of this poem, or did you guys have another favorite in the collection that we read? I don't know if you guys have done your response yet, but if you've looked at them, or if that's to last Monday, right? But any ones any of you all want to comment on before we move on to Madame Bovary?
I read Kubla. I thought it was interesting. a little confusing. Those kind of things, I feel like they confuse me a little sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great one too. That's why I gave that to you as an extra reading outside the textbook, because I really enjoy that one too. Um, that one's kind of about Coleridge had actually taken some opium when he wrote that poem. So that poem was almost about, they didn't like take pills back then. They took the real stuff, right? He took some opium. But that poem was pretty much his fever dream. It's almost like a fever dream he has of imagining Kubla Khan's palace, right, and all of its majesty and all of that stuff. Yeah, that one's a really cool one as well. Pull it up here.
I did mine on that Kubla Khan too. I liked it. I read about the opium that he had taken, the beforehand, and I even wrote that in my response that, maybe I wrote what I thought it was about, and then maybe it was just a rambling because he was, on opium when he wrote it.
Yeah.
I put on there that I felt like it was kind of a decision that he was trying to make, because the first part of it is it's kind of like it follows Romanticism, but the second part of it, between the exclamation points and the demons and the different stuff, it was kind of like he was trying to make a decision on which direction he was wanting to go with the poem.
Yeah, that same thing. Confused, very. Like, it's romantic, but it was talking about nature. Then it was talking about the woman and her demon lover. I was confused. I don't know why. I was confused, but I liked it. And then I did an audio on it also, so it kind of like had this weird music. It was like good music at first, and then about the second, it kind of went like dark and heavy, and I guess it kind of helped a little to understand on what it was talking about.
Yeah, we see his he rhymes back to back most of the time too. Yeah, the content is all over the place. And this is the poem I would encourage you guys not to overanalyze. Just let it go with the flow with it, right? Just kind of go with the flow with his almost like stream of consciousness thoughts here, right? I think that's the best way to enjoy it. It's just, this is one you don't want to overanalyze. Just let it flow. That kind of goes against English teacher rules, right? We like to overanalyze everything. This is one I just say, just enjoy it and go with the flow as it goes on, just because it is so random with its content.
I think I kind of did overanalyze it, but it did strike my imagination very well. Like, I felt like I could see what he was saying, which might be bad because he was hot. So
he accomplished his job, right? If he was high, he was having these like fever dreams, and you can imagine it yourselves just reading it, right? He did his job.
He did. He did a good job.
Yeah, this poem is also a good example. Like I talked before, like about colonialism. This was the time period where the Brits were colonizing the rest of pretty much all of Asia. So the fact that this was even a subject to write about, I mean, it kind of shows this colonizing instinct that the English had. So I just kind of wanted to raise that point with you all too. It was at this time the English had conquered China at this time period, right? You got the English are the world's greatest drug lords, right? They conquered China by getting the most of the Chinese people hooked on opium. Right. So in the 19th century. So yeah, they colonized India. They colonized China, way up into Mongolia, which is what this poem's about. So yeah, the English, they have a lot of sins from their colonizing days. Right? Just kind of just like how Americans have the sin of slavery, right? They have the sin of colonization all over them. But so with colonization, they would kind of imagine these people like the Mongolians, like Genghis and Kubla Khan, or the old Chinese emperors and stuff. They would kind of romanticize them as well, make them look exotic and different and stuff. I kind of wanted to raise that point about the poem too. This is a good example of that. It's not something we're going to talk about much in the rest of the class. That's more of a subject for if you were taking the non-Western world lit class, because you would read a lot of stuff from East Asia and India and stuff like that. Yeah, that you talk more about that kind of thing in that class. That's not my area of expertise. But this is a good poem where the West is kind of making the East look exotic, right? Yeah, I'm glad you guys enjoyed that one too. That's like I said, that's why I assigned it, because it's an interesting one. Wordsworth. All you guys agree with me? You just think Wordsworth was the most boring of the lot? Or did you guys enjoy Wordsworth? He's worth a read. He's just not my thing.
I did my early week discussion on William Blake's The Tyger. I thought it was interesting, especially the 4 lines that you pointed out. It was like he was questioning, I guess, God creating. Could he create something like this ferocious and this beautiful, but also create something like a lamb that's something so meek, so gentle? You know, could he create both things at the same time? So I wrote my early week discussion about the Tyger. That was the one that kind of stood out the most to me. And then also when I was looking like on the thread to see, I didn't want to pick the same thing that everybody else had picked, and it seemed like the majority had picked the one that we just read. So I wanted to do something different.
Yeah, I agree with you, Stacy. That's definitely my favorite romantic poem. Percy Shelley's another good romantic poet. He was Mary Shelley's husband. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. He's a good one too that the book didn't include. My favorite one of his is called Mont Blanc. Or he also wrote another one called Ozymandias, which is really cool. If you guys take British Lit 2 as an elective, right? I think Vicky Evans teaches that. But you would cover a lot of these guys in that class. Yeah, British Lit 2 is one I don't teach. It's one of the only ones I don't teach in our curriculum. I'm just not good with it. So let's segue over then to Madame Bovary. Yeah, so that's almost perfect. Spent 30 minutes with the romantics. So that'll be easy for my video editing later. Yeah, I want to post today's class up to our Blackboard page. Yesterday's class kind of went off the rails a good bit. You got all of you guys know Timmy, right? We kind of went off the rails yesterday. So today's class will be our one that's posted this week. But Usually the way it goes, I think the Friday class usually is kind of goes better anyway, mostly because I iron out what I didn't get to do the day before. So yeah, so usually you guys get the better class anyway. I think both people on both days are wonderful, but I think I adjust on the second day